New leaks reveal more and more about the plot of the new Candy Canyon adventure. However, there are many details you may have missed, so let's get started. I would like to discuss this image that was published yesterday by Glitch. And apparently even the creators themselves did not expect such an interesting episode. But apparently on May 3rd, we will see something unimaginatively delicious. But what intrigued me much more was the image itself, where the chaos is going on. Kane, as the chef, personifies the main man in this so-called kitchen and just watches as if nothing is happening. And I think he's even happy with everything that's going on. Remember how in the trailer, we were shown Gangle with a comedy mask, and even though during the whole adventure in Candy Canyon, Gangle was sad, but at the end we see a smile on her mask again, and we all thought that this episode could be a happy one for Gangle. But with just one leak, Glitch crushed all our hopes, and I think Gangle was not chosen by chance. Look closely and you'll see a cake that appears to be the culprit of this fire. And this cake symbolizes the happiness that was supposed to wait for our characters in Candy Canyon Kingdom. But together with it, the hope for a happy future of the circus inhabitants was burned. And Gangle's face at this moment literally screams to us about it. It is also worth mentioning Pomni, who in her usual gloomy state just resigned herself to the fact that something terrible will be waiting for her in the new episode. This shot reminds me of something. And for fun, I'll add that in this image, Pomni reminds me of a candle that is about to burst into flames and completely burn out. Maybe that's what the creators are trying to tell us. And Ragatha just froze, waiting for what will happen next, and apparently her mental state is already so badly damaged that nothing can surprise her. Kane isn't the only one happily watching what's going on around her. Behind all the characters, we can see the silhouette of the already known crocodile Gummigoo, and he is probably even more happy than Kane. And as we remember from the trailer, Gummigoo is the main anti-hero of the new episode, and in the previous video we assumed that their confrontation will end peacefully. But Glitch clearly hinted that Gummigoo is not so simple and that he will be ready to do anything to get rid of our characters. And most likely, he will do it. Another fun leak is this image of Kane holding the other characters in his hat. I didn't expect anything else from Gangle, Ragatha, and Pomni are the only ones who are scared of such an amazing trick from Kane. Kinger doesn't understand anything, and Jax is not happy with what's going on. And as you can see, the events take place in Candy Canyon Kingdom, but since during the whole trailer we saw Kane only 2 times, we can assume that this scene will be waiting for us at the end of the episode. And if you've been watching closely, you'll know that the background shows the Candy Castle wall from the inside, and this is the first leak that refers us to the castle interior. However, the most valuable thing about this image is the description. We so back. We are told by the developers, and there are 2 theories here about what this could mean. Perhaps this is just Glitch's way of stating that news about the digital circus will now be released with the same intensity as before. Or maybe it's a reference to Kane, because as you remember I said that this scene will be at the end of our adventure, so it could be Kane and Bubble making a statement. I'm sure that all these sweets will be given to our characters for passing the test in Candy Canyon Kingdom. And since we already have a lot of information about what we can expect in the new episode and even some hints about the fate of the characters in the second episode, let's take a look at some options for the development of events. And we would like to start with Pomni, because we realize that this character is probably the most unhappy in the new episode. After all, even Gangle, whose joy mask broke again, was much less horrified than our favorite Pomni. As you remember, Pomni was initially against the new adventure because she had enough of the pilot episode. But Kane doesn't care about that, and he forcefully sends everyone to Candy Canyon, and everything was going well initially. But then Gummigoo and his gang stole her, then an unforgettable trip on the roof and a dizzying merry-go-round. And Pomni experienced what it's like to be a projectile fired from a cannon. And that's how we got to the main part of Pomni, abstraction. I think everyone was confused by this fragment, because the pilot episode showed us the same thing, but to a much lesser extent. Pomni's hand will abstract it again, and it's not a joke because we see the fall into the same basement that Kaufmo once fell into. And whether Pomni can really leave the amazing digital circus already in the new episode. And if we take this image seriously, then such a possibility exists. Because as I said before, we can clearly see Pomni's mental state, which has already been shaken in the pilot episode. I told you once before that it would be a complete nonsense if Pomni really turns into an abstracted monster already on May 3rd, and it is unknown how it will affect later episodes, so it is safe to say that Glitch and Gooseworx will not risk that much. I have 2 theories about the origin of this fragment. Everyone remembers that before Kane broke into Pomni's room, our girl was sleeping peacefully, so we can't deny the fact that turning into an abstracted monster and falling into the basement is just a scary dream after everything that happened on the first day in the digital circus tent. But on the other hand, it may not be a dream, but a hallucination that Pomni could have experienced on 2 occasions. Everyone remembers the first appearance of Fudge Monster in the trailer, and I experienced a very strange sensation while watching it. And if you watched my last video carefully, you remember how I said that Fudge Monster may have the ability to hypnotize the other characters, and therefore who prevents him to hypnotize Pomni and make her feel all this horror, and then just throw her out of the water. I mean, theoretically this character could live anywhere in Candy Canyon Kingdom, or something else threw Pomni out of the water so hard, and of course she ended up falling, and maybe she hit her head on landing and lost consciousness, and that's when she thought she was becoming what Kaufmo had become. Also, I can't help but mention Gangle, who was very happy at first because she had a comedy mask on her face, but then we see that this mask disappeared again. And if we look at the first fragments of the characters in Candy Canyon Kingdom, we can see that the comedy mask is still there, but as soon as they drove the truck, we are shown that Gangle is back to her usual state. But what happened to the comedy mask, and why is it back to Gangle if it was still broken at the end of the pilot episode? Judging by the leaks, we understand that it is impossible to glue this mask together without being noticed, and in this case, I have only one option left: Kane. He created a new mask for Gangle so that during the journey through Candy Canyon, Gangle would not finally turn into a depressive character who can't do anything and doesn't want to. But at what point did the mask break? It seems to me that in the new episode, there will be a repeat of the situation of the pilot episode where Jax breaks the mask of comedy. And the reason for this may be too positive mood of Gangle, because of which she may not want to drive the truck, and thus Jax stimulated our Gangle. And also I am sure that in the third episode, Kane will again create a new mask for Gangle, and who will break it is not a secret. And judging by this leak, there is a probability that the second episode will end for Gangle on the same sad note as the pilot one. And if we've already mentioned Fudge Monster, it would be a crime not to tell about him. We know that he can hypnotize characters and change the shape of his body, and this comparison totally proves it, but how important his role will be in the new episode? Everyone remembers Gloink's Queen, right? In general, they are similar, and although Gloink's Queen was a relatively important character in the pilot episode, we could have done without her existence. And I'm sure that Fudge Monster will have a similar role, which will take up at most 2 to 3 minutes of the second episode's timeline. And I think it's obvious to everyone that Fudge Monster is a negative character. But the main role among the villains will definitely go to Gummagoo and his gang. In case you didn't know, the other two alligators are named Max and Chad. Well, since we already talked about Gummagoo and he appears on one of the leaks, let's summarize who Gummagoo is. Also, don't forget that Gooseworx directly stated that all new characters will be NPCs, which means that Gummagoo will unfortunately be a character that will appear in only one episode, and we will never see him again. Let's summarize Gummagoo as a negative character that Gooseworx will add to the new episode in order to diversify the picture of the illusory goodness that happens in Candy Canyon Kingdom. Because if you look at it objectively, few people would be interested in watching the circus residents simply traveling and exploring the Candy Kingdom and performing simple tasks for Princess Lulilalu. And it is the appearance of Gummagoo that will be the anchor that will drag the main storyline of the digital circus. As I said before, the main role of Gummagoo will be the variety of the story due to his character, which as we have found out will be similar to Jax, and therefore the new episode promises to be very interesting. But we will only find out on May 3rd, but in the meantime I'll keep you happy with new videos as often as possible. Have a good day everyone.